Hi, I'm Nanowave, or Ryan, depends on who you ask. You're not here for me though, you're here for functional harmony. In this video, I will assume you know nothing about music at all. I will start with the very basics. If you're already an accomplished music theorist, this is not the video for you. Or maybe it is, if you care for my impeccable commentary. So let's get started. Almost all music you will hear today uses a set of frequencies that we call 12-tone equal temperament. This means that there are 12 unique notes and they are all spaced equally apart from one another. We can then sort these 12 tones into sequences and call these sequences scales. Here's a pretty common one. We call that one C major because it starts on the note C and then follows a specific pattern. Now notice how between some notes there's an extra one, like between C and D there's C sharp, but between other notes like E and F there isn't a note between them. We call these different distances whole steps and half steps. Whole step meaning you skip a note between two, and half steps meaning you don't skip a note. If you use this specific series of steps, so a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and then another half step, you always end up with a major scale, just starting on a different note. Here's what D major looks like, for example. So we start on D, then we go up a whole step. So we skip D sharp, go straight to E, then we have another whole step, so we skip F and go straight to F sharp, and then we have a half step, so we go to G, then a whole step to A, a whole step to B, another whole step, so we skip C and go to C sharp, and then a half step to return to D. The major scale is probably the most commonly used scale in popular music today. Why is that? The short version is that it just sounds good, and we found it through trial and error. The long version is, but this arrangement of notes is not the only one that sounds good. There's also the natural minor scale, which has a whole step, half step pattern of whole, half, whole, half, whole. Here's what that sounds like. Hey, wait, we haven't seen those weird flat notes yet. What the heck are those? Well, we actually have seen them before. A flat symbol, or the B, means you are playing the note a half step below the named one, while a sharp means you are playing the note a half step above the named one. So if we look at our chart of notes, that means D sharp, which is one half step above D, is the same note as E flat, one half step below E. So why do we have different names for these notes? Well, it's a lot easier to read a C natural minor scale as C, D, E flat, F, as opposed to C, D, D sharp, F. Having both sharps and flats allows us to spell scales alphabetically. It's a little bit confusing, I'll admit, but trust me, it's going to make things a lot easier later on. Anyways, back to the natural minor scale. The natural minor scale is all well and good, but it doesn't feel as final as the major scale. When you run up a major scale, it feels finished, and the minor scale is kind of lacking that. Why is that? The major scale ends with a half step, while the minor scale ends in a whole step. That softer, shorter step into the tonic, the note that the scale starts and ends on, sounds a lot more final in the major scale. Okay, well, what if we just put a half step onto the end of the minor scale? We can do that by raising the 7th scale degree, or the 7th note in the scale, by a half step. Congratulations, you made a new scale. This one's called Harmonic Minor, and it's probably my favorite to work with. Yeah, that sounds a lot more final than me. But hang on a second. We have a huge gap in this scale. That jump from A flat to B is more than a whole step. We haven't even talked about a name for that yet. This leap kind of breaks up the scale, and it doesn't feel as flowing as the natural minor or the major scale. So we can fix that as well by raising scale degree 6. And once again, we've invented a new scale. This one's called Melodic Minor, and it sounds like this. Now, unlike the rest of the scales we've learned about, this one's different whether you're going up or down. On the way up, it has those raised 6th and 7th scale degrees, while on the way down, it's exactly like the natural minor scale. Why is that? Well, the push towards the tonic, or scale degree 1, from the raised 7th scale degree can be a bit too strong sometimes. When writing a melody with a melodic minor scale, if you're going up from scale degree 5, you're probably going to want to end up at scale degree 1, and the raised 6th and 7th scale degrees push you towards that. But if you're going down from scale degree 1, then that raised 7th is going to try to push you back towards the tonic, and it's going to make melodic movement kind of hard. Alright, so that's a basic overview of notes and how we organize notes. Let's move on to the fun stuff. Chords. Before we move on, we're going to have to upgrade our little keyboard here. So not only is our new keyboard bigger, but I've also replaced the actual names of notes with scale degrees from C Harmonic Minor. It's going to be a lot easier talking in terms of scale degrees when we're referring to chords, so this will just make things a little bit easier. So what is a chord? Technically, a chord is a collection of 3 or more notes, but we're just going to be focusing on one specific kind, triads. Triads only have 3 notes, a root, a third, and a fifth, and you form a triad by starting on the root note, then skipping notes in the scale, like this. This is a C minor chord. We name chords by their root and how many half steps there are between each note. A minor chord has 3 half steps between the root and the third, and 4 half steps between the third and the fifth. A major chord is the reverse. It has 4 half steps between the root and the third, and 3 half steps between the third and the fifth. We call this aspect of chords its quality. On top of major and minor triads, there are diminished and augmented. Diminished is 3 half steps between the root and third, and 3 half steps between the third and fifth. It sounds like this. Augmented is 4 half steps between the root and third, and 4 half steps between the third and fifth. It sounds like this. We don't just call chords by the name of the root note, we also call them by the name of the scale degree they're built on. The scale degree the chord is built on is notated with Roman numerals. The quality is notated by the case of the numerals. Major triads are capitalized, minor triads are lowercase. Diminished triads are lowercase with a degree sign next to them, and augmented triads are capital with a plus sign. So here's what the quality of every chord in the harmonic scale looks like. We have different names for some of the more important chords. The one chord is called the tonic. It's the tonal center. The one chord feels like home. It's the most stable of the chords, and it's usually what a song will start and end on. The 5 chord is called the dominant. It dominates the harmony. It's really tense. It really likes to resolve to the 1 chord. It sounds really good when you do that. Here's an example. So the 5 chord has an extreme sense of tension, and the 1 chord has an extreme sense of stability and resolution. These aren't the only chords that fulfill these functions. Wait, functions? That sounds like the... We're finally here. Functional harmony. Basically, in any key, chords can be grouped into one of 3 categories, or functions: tonic, dominant, and subdominant. We'll get to subdominant later, though. 1, 3, and 6 are all tonic functioning chords, 5, 3, and 7 are all dominant functioning chords, and 2 and 4 are subdominant functioning, but again, we'll get to those later. Let's take a look at these dominant and tonic chords in context, and why not look at one of my own pieces? These are the first 4 measures of my piece Sketch War, which is, coincidentally, in C Harmonic Minor. Crazy how things work out, isn't it? Let's take a listen. Alright, so let's take a look at that first chord. In the cello 2, we have a C, or scale degree 1. In the cello 1, we have a G, or scale degree 5. In the viola 2, we have an E flat, or scale degree 3. Scale degrees 1, 3, and 5 form our tonic, the minor 1 chord. Next up, we have a B in the cello 2, a G in the cello 1, and a D in the viola 2. Together, these notes form a G major chord, which is our 5, which is a dominant function. Wait a second, why did I put an Arabic numeral 6 after that Roman numeral 5? Well, it's a shorthand way of saying that the third of the chord is the lowest note being played. The reason it's a 6 is really long and complicated, and I don't have the time or energy to explain it, honestly, but that's just how it's done. It's an antiquated system. The next chord is exactly the same as the first one, so it's our minor 1, and it is serving a tonic function. After that, we have something that's almost the same as the second chord, but not quite. We have a B in the cello 2, a G in the cello 1, but an F in the viola 2, and another B in the violin 1. Normally this chord would include scale degrees 5, 7, 2, and 4, but the 2 was left out. This combination of 4 notes is a super version of the dominant. It's called the dominant 7 because it includes a root, a third, a fifth, and a chordal 7th, and it serves as a sort of souped up version of the 5 chord. At this point, it's pretty clear what the pattern is. I'm just switching between tonic and dominant function chords over and over again. So I'm just going to fill in the rest of the progression and not walk through every single step of it. Wait, hang on a sec. What's that 5/7/5? Well, let's take a look at the note names. In the cello 2, we have a D. In the cello 1, we have an F sharp, and in the viola 2, we also have an F sharp. And in the violin 1, we have a C. Now, there's a bit of a gap between those, so I'm going to guess that there's an A that's being left out of that. So D, F sharp, A, C. That forms a dominant 7, but not for the key of C minor. The notes F sharp and A don't occur in C harmonic minor. So what key could it work in? What about G major? The chord that immediately follows this D dominant 7 is a G major chord. So I guess that makes sense. And if you'll remember, G major is the dominant, the 5 chord of C harmonic minor. So we're using a dominant chord of the dominant chord to get like a double resolution in there. That's called a secondary dominant, and it's pretty common in classical music, and I love the sound of it. And since it still generates a large amount of tension, I'm still gonna classify it as a dominant function chord. So yeah, secondary dominants are pretty cool, but what happens if we take that concept and apply it in reverse? What if the 1 chord is the 5 chord of something else? Well, it turns out that the 1 chord is actually the dominant of the 4 chord. And if you were paying attention earlier, you'll remember that the 4 chord is considered a subdominant chord. So if tonic chords serve as an anchor, a home base, and dominant chords serve as a place of tension that is sending you back to your home base, then what the heck do subdominant chords do? Well, subdominant chords will extend that journey from home to tension back to home. They serve as just another location, in my eyes. Let's listen to a 1-4-5 progression in C harmonic minor. That was quite pretty. Let's look at subdominant chords in context with a piece that I wrote. This one's a bit trickier to analyze than the last one because the notes are all spread out and not all being played at the same time. So I'm just going to make it easier for us and just give the analysis straight up. This piece does a pretty good job at showing what you can get out of functional harmony. At the beginning, it goes from tonic to subdominant to dominant, and then the second half goes straight from tonic to dominant. It's pretty rare that you'll see a dominant chord go to a subdominant chord because it's trying to push you towards the tonic so hard that it just sounds weird and off when you do that. Here's a quick example. Now, the astute few of you may have noticed a few strange things about this. First of all, the 3 chord is an augmented, and the 7 chords are major instead of diminished. That's because we're not using harmonic minor anymore, now we're in natural minor, where the 3 and 7 are both major. Now, a few more astute few of you may have realized that I completely mislabeled that 4-6. It's actually a 4-6-4. I'm an idiot for thinking it was ever a 4-6. And honestly, I should just have my music theory license revoked. No, but the strangest thing about this piece is that flat 2 chord. That doesn't occur naturally in natural minor at all. In fact, it doesn't occur naturally in any scale that we've talked about. So how are we going to classify that into one of our 3 groups? Well, it happens to share 2 of the same scale degrees as the 4 chord, that being F and A flat. So I'm going to classify it as a subdominant because of that reason, and also because it doesn't sound resolved, but it doesn't sound tense either. So, seems subdominant to me. So now we've seen all 3 functions of chords in action, and that's really all I have today. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something new from this video about functional harmony, and subscribe if you liked it. I don't know if I'm going to make another one of these. Probably not. I've been editing for 12 straight hours, So I'm a little bit miserable right now, but you know, subscribe anyway, I don't care. This has been Functional Harmony with Ryan. Thanks for watching.